Hello and welcome to Utter Punts. This is episode 6 at the end of week 6, and what a weekend of NFL football it was. Scores all over the place, and honestly, I don't even know where to start. I know where we'll start. We'll start by introducing the crew, shall we? First and foremost, we call him our Ginger Viking. He's the most wonderfully bad-tempered human being I've ever come across, and I absolutely love him for it. It's Big Dave Keane. You all right?
Yeah, it's not my fault. The rest of society are full of idiots, and I have to constantly control my reactions to their inane flipping and ramblings. And anyway, yeah, Dan's not even on this week. Don't know why I'm banging on about him.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful work. And we've also got little Ollie Keane with us as well. Hello, mate. You okay?
You alright, mate? How you doing?
Yeah, Sanders Pound, Tart, Sanders Pound. Look, so many places that we could start this podcast this week, because it was a weekend that was filled to the brim with brilliant scorelines. However, I think we're going to have to go Cowboys first, aren't we? Because, I mean, that was just wonderful, wonderful mayhem, Dave.
Well, I mean, how can I put this? I don't have the normal view of this game that everyone else does, in that it's great fun to see the Cowboys destroyed. Because I frankly hate the Lions now. They get away with injuring everybody else's players. And then when one of their own gets injured, everyone's meant to feel sorry for them. Well, you've played Kirby, Joseph. I don't feel sorry for you. Anyway, but back to the Cowboys. I was feeling sorry for them right up until I heard Jerry Jones on the extract from his conversation with some local radio people who he does a weekly appearance with, where they asked him why he hadn't done anything in the pre-season when he stated that they were going to go all in. Ollie, what did Dallas do this off-season after he said they were going to go all in?
Nothing. They did nothing.
Well, they've signed Eric Kendricks, a 32-year-old linebacker who, with all due respect to him, who was a fantastic player in his prime. He's probably seen his best days. They brought back Ezekiel Elliott as their running back option.
You can't run more than 2 yards.
Yeah, I mean, were there any good running backs available this off-season that they might have been able to go and get?
This is brilliant. They didn't even organise a meeting with him. Derrick Henry is available. He's a free agent. They didn't even organise a meeting with him, knowing that they were resigning Elliott.
Do you know where he's from?
Oh, don't tell me he's a Dallas boy.
Do you know where he was training in the off-season? So, Mr. Jerry Jones, with your all-in comment. Now, I understand what you meant by all-in now. You decided that, unlike everybody else's, who, when they say they're going all-in on something, which means I'm going to throw all the resources that I can at something in order to hopefully get it done. What you meant was, we're all in on the decisions that we have already made and the players we've already signed. What you meant was, we're not doing anything other than retaining our current playing staff. But that's not what you said. Now, I mean, there's a lot of reasons why you may not have just said that. But I think the primary one, potentially, following the money, allegedly, hyperbolically, I think it might have been ticket sales, right? Can you think of another reason why you'd lie to your fan base? And then when you get called on it by the people that you have agreed to see each week, tell them that you're going to get them fired.
I know why else this might happen. It might happen if your name's Jerry Jones. I mean, he's got previous.
Yeah. I mean, he does have a lot of previous. But yeah, I didn't want to start off with the traditional, the Lions were brilliant, unlucky the Lions with Hutchinson. The Lions have, last season alone, Kirby Joseph deliberately injured two tight ends 1 week after the other, one of whom was a former Lion in TJ Hawkinson. And when I say deliberately injured, I mean went into a tackle knowing there was a high likelihood that his action could bring about injury to the player he was hitting. And I know it was deliberate because he did the same the week after to the Rams tight end. No one batted an eyelid. Dan Campbell said it was part of the game. Well, I love Aidan Hutchinson. Think he's a fantastic player. He's a huge guy. Was really excited for Michigan getting him second overall. They didn't even have to spend the first overall pick on him because Jacksonville, and for some reason Tony Khan figured a guy who will probably end up being a wrestler was a better number 1 overall pick than Aidan Hutchinson. And now Aidan Hutchinson is hurt, and I hope he comes back because and stronger, because he's a great player to watch. This year he was the best pass rusher in the league. But I don't feel bad for the Lions. I feel bad for Aidan Hutchinson. Like, I don't want him to have to cope with what he's coping with right now. It's a horrible injury. We've done injury stuff before. I saw it happen live. Knew straight away what had happened. Liam, you might be old enough to remember this. Do you remember when David Boost broke his leg?
Do I?
Yeah, and then I think we've seen others. Villa fans won't thank me for reminding them of this, but they managed to sign the legendary Belgian footballer Luke Snillis, who looked like a world beater for them, and he had the same injury happen to him. He never came back. There's an Arsenal striker, Eduardo, who had a similar injury happen to him. He was never the same. I want Hutchinson to come back better than he was before. And it's different. Football's a bit different to the UK football. Soccer is a bit different to the NFL in that there's a need to have those nerve endings completely tied up and be normalised. I think that Hutchinson's physical prowess will allow him to come back and be a dominant force again.
I think you're right, and all of us here would send our very best to Aidan Hutchinson, because nobody wants to see any player suffer an injury like that. The reason that I'm so aware of the David Boost injury was that it happened against Manchester United, and it was Peter Schmeichel. I'm not sure there was anything untoward in that tackle. It's the way it goes, and I think you're right. I think, bearing in mind the time of that injury, sort of mid-90s, very different to now, sort of 35 years on, where the surgery is better, recovery times are better, physio's better. There's every chance that Aidan Hutchinson comes back here and is an absolute monster again, and we can only hope that that's the case. I think the other thing that I just need to point out here is that if the Lions were represented on this podcast, they would turn around and say to Dave that there was no way that they were going out to intentionally injure anybody. And although Dave is entitled to his opinion, I think it's probably just fair that we throw some balance into that, despite how any of us might feel.
Dan Campbell did at the time. Dan Campbell said that there was no way that Kirby set out to injure Hutchinson, and that he would be looking after players moving forward, making sure that that kind of tackle was only a competitive thing. The following week,
again,
the week after. Yeah. So I think that at the very least you're aware of the fact that you're putting the other player at risk, and maybe bearing in mind it's a sport, you yourself should maybe not want to do that.
Yeah.
But that's up to Kirby Joseph, right? I mean, we don't know him. He might not have been asked to do it by the Lions staff, probably wasn't. But at the same time, I do think that there's some hypocrisy in this reaction to Hutchinson going down and their immediate cries of foul, when it happened because of your own player accidentally catching somebody. It's a tragic accident. And I'll tell you something as well. Aidan Hutchinson is probably coping with it better than anybody else, because he strikes me as that kind of bloke who's literally he got a sack after that happened. What a man. Honestly, what a guy. 100% warrior. He actually managed to stop Dak after that had happened.
Incredible. Ollie, I'm going to give you some lovely news here, mate. It was Jerry Jones' birthday on Sunday whilst he was watching that. There can't be an awful lot of cheeriness about him, can there?
That whole franchise, I think, is doomed for the next decade because of Jerry Jones' actions this off-season, because of the way he acts, the control he holds over the Dallas Cowboys at the moment, for an 83-year-old man who says that no other GM could have done it better than him. This is the same guy who gave up Amari Cooper to the Cleveland Browns for a 5th-round pick, and then the Browns got a 3rd-round pick from the Buffalo Bills 2 years later for the same player. This is a man who had Saquon Barkley and Derrick Henry available this offseason. We talk about Henry and his obvious connections to the Cowboys, having the same agent as Dak, being from Dallas, training in Dallas, being in the deep south even with Tennessee, so he's used to that climate. But even if they couldn't get him, they could have gone for Saquon Barkley, one of the other best running backs in the league. Didn't go for him. They could have even gone for Tony Pollard, but they got rid of him and decided Zeke was better. I mean, just terrible, terrible decisions. I mean, and re-signing Dak Prescott to the most expensive contract in the league by $5 million more than the guy in second. I think it's Trevor Lawrence. Also an awful decision. I mean, cap has an effect on how franchises are run in the future. It's just a big part of it, and they've used most of it up on Dak Prescott and CD Lamb, who now both look terrible. I don't think they are terrible players, but under the current situation under Mike McCarthy, they look poor. And Jerry Jones, for the last 35 years, refuses to relinquish control to anyone. It's a different game. It's not what it was in the 90s when he came in as a swooning businessman with all his money, threw it at players and created a dynasty off the back of the Vikings being incompetent in the Herschel Walker trade. We built that dynasty for the Cowboys with all the picks we gave for a terrible running back. It's not that business anymore. It's an analytics business. It's intelligent people. It's like Brad Johnson at the Detroit Lions, Kwesi Adolfo-Mensah at the Vikings. You gotta have younger guys with these kind of mindsets in the general manager roles, and he's leading the team out after they've lost 47-7. It's not Mike McCarthy who's the head coach leading them out into the locker room.
9. They didn't get a touchdown. It's 3 field goals.
47-9 then. I mean, just terrible. I mean, I have a personal grudge because I have Dak Prescott in my fantasy team, and he got 3 points. And I would have had the highest points of the week if he'd done, what normal quarterback averages, which is about 20 points.
Would you like his stats line from the game?
Yes.
33 attempted passes, 17 completed for 178 yards. That's a 51% completion rate. This is where it gets good. No touchdowns, 2 interceptions, 4 sacks. I mean, it's about as bad as it gets.
It's a Deshaun Watson level game.
It's
a Deshaun Watson level game. I mean, okay, Dak passes it for a completion more on third downs than Watson, who went, I think Jim was saying, 25 third downs in a row without getting a first, which is bloody awful.
Browns fans aren't very happy, are they? I can't see
No,
that.
but the Cowboys, I genuinely worry for their future because they've done what the Vikings did, but with more money on longer term with Kirk. And they've tied themselves to Dak Prescott now, who is another version of that same Kirk Cousins bracket of quarterback who is decent, can do a job, but isn't going to win you anything and is overpaid. He's in that bracket at the minute, and the Cowboys are tied to him. Jerry Jones won't relinquish control till the day he dies. And knowing those billionaire types, he's probably not going to die till he's in his hundreds. So I truly worry for the Cowboys' future. And they've got Washington in their division, who are getting much better with Jaden Daniels. They've got Philadelphia, who, at the end of the day, they're having a poor season, but they always find a way to bounce back. And they've got the Giants, who, once you depart from Daniel Jones and hopefully bring in a proper quarterback, if you keep the Brian Daboll or bring in a better coach, you could be a formidable force in the future. You've got weapons like Dexter Lawrence, Brian Burns, Kieran Thibodeau, Malik Neighbors. I think the Cowboys could end up being a bottom of that division in the future.
I agree with you. Interesting. We won't linger on the Giants because it was another loss, and what I found interesting was how close they managed to keep it. A 17-7 game, and actually had an opportunity to tie it up, but didn't manage to do that because of another missed kick. And the Giants are slowly clawing their way back to the middle, which is...
I've said at the start of the season, you had a good defence, mate. You don't have Dexter Lawrence, Thibodeau and Brian Burns and not have the ability to get after a QB.
So essentially all I'm saying, Ollie, is that you're absolutely spot on. Shall we just talk briefly about some of the trades that have happened this week, because this has been really, really interesting. I tell you what, before we do that, we're going to talk about trades in just a moment here on Utter Punts. First thing though, to be able to keep this podcast going, we rely on you hitting the subscribe button, making sure you click the bell for notifications and hitting like on every single video. And we are hugely thankful to have a couple of sponsors who help keep this podcast going too. So stay right where you are. We'll be back with you after a note from them. If you're anything like us at Utter Punts, we love the fantasy games surrounding the NFL, but sometimes they're a bit too focused on their American audiences. That's why we were blown away when the Fantasy Game Day app rolled into town, a weekly fantasy game with player values in pounds totally dedicated to the NFL's UK audience. There's insights and analysis and plenty of opportunity to compete with your friends, but the best bit, weekly cash prizes. Use code PUNTS when you sign up for a free entry after you play your first week. Right then. I told you we were going to talk about trades. There have been 3, I think, biggies this week, haven't there? Ollie, which one are we starting with? Where do you want to start with these trades?
I think it's only right to start with the biggest trade of the week and the biggest news. And it's not a shocker, really. It's Davante Adams to the New York Jets. So I had the pleasure of seeing the Jets myself in person a couple of weeks ago, which was Robert Saleh's last game. We know it's been a hectic couple of weeks for them. Jeff Ulbrich now, the current acting head coach, who was the defensive coordinator. They lost on Monday night to Buffalo Bills. They shouldn't have lost that game, by the way. Mike Williams ran the wrong route. Aaron Rodgers throws an interception. Mike Williams, who ran the wrong route, by the way, who's been put up for trade by the New York Jets. A couple of hours after Davante Adams has signed. Interestingly, 15 minutes after it was announced they're trading for him, he was in the building on the Pat McAfee show behind Aaron Rodgers with his custom green New York Jet cleats. So obviously that's been in the works for a while. Listen, it's some may call it a Green Bay Packers retirement home. I think it's a good chance of being competitive this season after a slow start.
I heard that as well. Dave, this is really interesting. So if Tom Brady goes to the Buccaneers and takes players that he trusts to the Buccaneers with him, it's seen as a masterstroke by Tom Brady, who's taken people that he trusts to the Buccaneers with him, and they go on and win a Super Bowl. Now, I'm not suggesting that the Jets are going to go and do that. What I am saying is that is there a little bit of a difference in how that is being reported because it's Aaron Rodgers and not Tom Brady?
I think it's more of a difference in how it's been reported because of who the players are that they're bringing in. So if you think about it logically, Tom Brady was bringing in 2 to 3 people who helped him to win Super Bowls. Aaron Rodgers is bringing in 2 to 3 people who helped him lose the NFC North to the Vikings every other year. It's that simple, really.
It's fair cop.
I mean, listen.
I mean, look, the Davante Adams is such a good wide receiver. It's going to make a big difference, I think. But they don't have an O-line that's keeping him clean. They've got things going wrong in terms of injuries in there as well. In terms of a running game, it should be incredible. And maybe now that they've got a wide receiver who understands what needs to happen there, they might unlock the running game just in terms of him actually helping out blocking. But he's a star wide receiver who's 32 years old, in the twilight of his career. He's an incredible player throughout. But he basically, I would expect him to be worth maybe 1 or 2 additional wins to the Jets, not to say that he's going to put them going on a streak. But then the Jets have got an unbelievable amount of talent on their defence. And without being funny, it doesn't feel like it was being fully realised by Robert Saleh. The Williams brothers, they're both so talented, and one's a defensive tackle, the other's a linebacker. Neither seem to have progressed that much under Robert Saleh in terms of like getting to the next level. I expected them to be at a point now where both of those guys will be considered 2 of the best players in their positions in the league. But you think about previous conversations we've had around the 3 techniques, who Simmons, Dexter Lawrence. Like, there are elite players who are standing out ahead of Williams, who for me have probably got the most talent of all of those guys coming out. So I think that the biggest change that could be happening at the Jets isn't so much they've managed to bring in Rodgers. It might Adams for Rodgers. It might be the fact that they're going to hold each other a bit more accountable, and that there's maybe not as much of a culture of, oh, you're so good, yeah, but you didn't get this right. Well, don't worry about that. Look at the thing that he did do well, because I saw that on Hard Knocks with them with Chaz Surratt, who's a former Vikings draft pick, who's a former quarterback who converted to linebacker. And against a third-string team, he made a tackle, and Robert Saleh was running up and down the sideline telling him he was amazing, and the Vikings didn't know what they'd lost. Well, he started the game against the Vikings and did all right. Great, but not to the exceptional level that it's been portrayed. And at a point where if you start telling everybody that someone who is good is great, your opinion doesn't mean as much. And I think that Salah's sort of time and ability to control that dressing gown dressing room.
I mean,
Control
you've got to
that dressing
your
gown, my
dressing
friend.
gown.
You do have to, especially if you haven't got a belt on.
Yeah.
But,
or you've, a lack of boxer shorts, that definitely needs controlling at that stage.
Control that dressing room. But I feel like he kind of undermined himself by being overly positive about certain aspects that he shouldn't have been, in order to try to give that positive atmosphere to the room. The great coaches are positive, but also hold their players accountable.
Do they not need a man manager, Ollie? Somebody that isn't going to be overawed by the fact that Aaron Rodgers is the quarterback? Because you look at all of the reporting at the moment, and all of the reporting is that Aaron Rodgers holds the power in that locker room. Aaron Rodgers is the guy for that franchise. They've now lost the head coach. The next person that comes in permanently to do that job for the rest of forever, do they need to have the ability to say no?
Listen, I was talking about this with my old man earlier, actually, with Aaron Rodgers. I think he respects Robert Saleh. I think he even likes him, maybe considers him a friend. But when, in any walk of life, when you get told to do something and you know it's wrong, and you know the way you do it is better, eventually you're going to get tired of that. And I think even against Buffalo, we saw that the offense was a bit freer than it was under Robert Saleh. See, I think it's not an Aaron Rodgers ego thing. I really don't. I think that's a media thing. I think, hypothetically, if Andy Reid went to the New York Jets, it's not going to happen, but if Andy Reid got placed as the New York Jets head coach, Aaron Rodgers would listen to everything he's saying and would do everything he's saying, because he knows, guess what, this guy's won multiple Super Bowls. This guy knows what he's doing. I'm not saying that he didn't listen to Salah or respect him, but there's only so much you can take of knowing that this is wrong, knowing that this isn't going to work at the end of the day. And I don't believe the stories that Aaron Rodgers got him fired. I think Woody Johnson, as Bill Belichick has said, is an erratic owner. You never know what he's going to do, which is why the Jets have been a failure for the last 25 years during his ownership and haven't made the playoffs since 2011. I don't think Rodgers walked in and went fire Salah. I think it came to a surprise as him. But now he may be getting asked by the owner, what should we do? Now I've fired Salah, what should we do? Well, bring in Davante, Jeff Ulbrich as head coach for the rest of the season, and let's see where we can go. Let's kind of go all in for what we can this season, sitting at the time 2-3, now 2-4 in a very close divisional game. Listen, if they brought in Bill Belichick, for instance, I don't think there'd be an ego clash. I think he'd listen to this well-respected head coach. So I don't think it's someone needs to come in and say no to Rodgers. I think they just have to understand how to win.
So Rodgers is a guy who they invested an awful lot of money in. Last year was going to be the year. He tore his cruciate. He's getting older. He's maybe got one more year. If I'm them, I clear everybody out of Aaron Rodgers' way. Do everything that I can to give him exactly what he needs to try and get him into the playoffs. If they make the playoffs, who knows, right? So I think it is all in for them, and not in the Jerry Jones way. I think they literally got to give it a right good shot. They managed to get Adams in for only a third-round pick. I think it becomes a second if they make the playoffs. Is that the condition on it? So effectively, they're willing to pay out that additional capital to achieve something this year, whilst Aaron Rodgers is still fit and healthy. The guy is the wrong side of 40 now. And you're right, there is the whole thing about Aaron Rodgers being an evil man, an evil dictator. Why do people keep buying his BS? Well, sometimes Aaron Rodgers is right about things. And he's often right about things which most people challenge him on when you actually do some research and check into the information he provided to the NFL and then what the NFL's response to that was. And so, like, for me, Rodgers is a guy who walks to the beat of his own drum. He knows he's coming to the end. He's brought in Adams. I wouldn't be surprised to see him try and trade out Hassan. Who is it? The guy who's holding out at the moment?
Hassan Reddick.
Yeah, for Reddick. Try and trade him out, right? They can potentially get their third round pick back in for him. But it really wouldn't surprise me if they actually go and chase somebody else's pass rushers or an additional weapon somewhere for Rodgers. There might be, I don't know, they might be able to steal a guard from the Browns, for example, because it looks like the Browns are now a selling team. You don't let Amari Cooper go for a third round pick unless you're a selling team, as as Jerry Jones showed when he let him go for a fifth. Dallas must be a selling team. So maybe a team could make a play for one of the great pass rushers who are left. And I'm thinking Raiders have got Max Crosby sitting there. Maybe they could pull him over to New York as well to reuse. Maybe they could go after someone a little bit more alternative, like Micah Parsons, because as far as I can see, Dallas should really be looking to sell their commodities right now as well.
Jerry Jones will never do that. That's the thing.
I mean, this is the thing. They've brought in a defensive coordinator who loves to play a 4-3. Now, with a 4-3 front, you tend to have a 3 technique who's about £300, a nose tackle is about $320 plus, and then you have your 2 defensive ends, both of whom should be around £275 to £280. That's how you formulate Zimmer anyway. Likes to formulate his D lines. Micah Parsons is an edge rusher in the 3-4 who's now been shoehorned into a 4-3. He's probably not very happy with the way things are going. Don't get me wrong, you could reconvert him back into being a middle linebacker in the 4-3, but then he's not going to be pass rushing. He's not going to be worth as much. So. Honestly, I think Jerry Jones has created for himself another a round shape for a square hole there. It's just not going to fit. So the decision in Dallas for Jerry Jones is going to have to be, well, do I want to keep this set of coaches? I mean, I wouldn't. Or do I want to keep this nucleus of players? Because effectively what he's done is brought in coaches that don't fit the players that he has. So they are either going to have to change their playing staff to fit to the coaches. Why would you have faith in this set of coaches? Mike Zimmer, since he left the Vikings, has done nothing but show himself to be a man who can't let grudges go. That's not a good thing in a guy who's meant to be running a franchise. So, yeah, I mean, all of this trade stuff which is going on at the moment is really, really interesting and really, really exciting. But I can't help but feel the team that no one seems to be talking about as now having a really, really, really heavy need and definitely in a Super Bowl window. For Lions, having lost Hutch, they need to go get a pass rusher, and it needs to be someone who can fit their system. They just need to suck it up and go and deal with it, because their team is so good, they are so tough, but they'll miss him. He's such a good player, they'll miss him. They need to replace him.
The other big trade this week is Amari Cooper, who has decided to suit up for the Bills, having left the Browns. Every last bit of media you read on Amari Cooper says the same thing, that this guy is a certified 100% no holds barred gold category footballer. Agree or disagree, gents?
He's not in the upper echelon. So for me, it comes into tiers of. In my head, there's a tier at the moment in the NFL, which has basically got the 3 top wide receivers in the NFL: Tyreek Hill, Justin Jefferson, and probably Jamar Chase, right?
Yeah.
So those 3 are my, like, you could put them in any team, they'd be able to perform any role. If they were fit, there might be another one who's in that category, and that's Cooper Kupp, who knows every route in the route tree, can play X, Z, slot, whatever you want him to play, but he's never fit. And then Puka Nacua also has a chance to be a similar sort of echelon of player, but he's not fit either. So at the moment, for me, for those 3, Amon-Ra St. Brown, I would put basically on the seat right behind them, and potentially with his feet stretching over into their space. He's another very, very good wide receiver. But apart from those 4, who I think do transcend any offense, anybody else, even if you're really, really good, so the likes of T. Higgins, Amari Cooper, they'd all go into that. You are a number 1 wide receiver, but you're not a top 5 wide receiver in the league.
He's got 2,500 yards for 4 different teams in the NFL. Does that not suggest that he is capable of slotting into any offense?
But when I'm talking about transcending offenses, Liam, I mean like turning a team from having a bad offense into having a good. And if you want to know if he can do that, he hasn't managed it with the Browns, has he?
The Bills, to focus on them, they could have had Dave and Jim as their wide receivers this season. It hasn't really mattered up until this point.
Mate, there was a trade came in for Jim, but he failed the medical. It's where he is.
So they brought in Amari Cooper because they've been winning, but they haven't been winning well, if that makes sense. You know, they should have lost that game against the Jets. They've had a couple of poor displays. It's mainly been Josh Allen running and James Cook being handed off to, and that's pretty much been the carrying of their offense. It's not the same Buffalo Bills that we've seen in the previous 5 years, I'd say. Obviously, Stephon Diggs left, done pretty well at the Texans, beat the Bills in that revenge game. So they've brought in Amari Cooper. They've clearly seen, you know, the Browns are a selling team and we need a good wide receiver. And he is that. He is a good wide receiver. Dave's right. He's not one that will transcend a franchise, is going to get all the fans out, you know, sign his shirt, whether you're Bills or not, you know what I mean? Like, people will go meet Justin Jefferson, Tyreek Hill, even if they're not Vikings or Dolphins fans, because he's just that good. They're just that good.
Jerry Maguire, Liam. Jerry Maguire. That's what it is. He's Cuba Gooding Jr. He's eminently talented, but where's the heart?
But another thing in terms of Amari Cooper this season, he's had Deshaun Watson throwing the ball to him this season and prior. And he had about 4 different quarterbacks throwing the ball to him last year. And Deshaun Watson, this is the worst quarterback in the league at the moment. You can't go 25 third downs in a row without making a first as a professional NFL player. And he's still playing. He's still not going to be benched. Stefanski came out and said, listen, I know Jim's not on today, so we won't go too much on the Browns.
I think it's worth talking about the Browns. It's one of the games that I was going to bring up just because, you know, the Eagles made them look competitive, which is something else that we can have a little chat about in a second. But just finish that thought process, Ollie, without apologising for the fact that you were having it.
I just think, listen, Amari Cooper's going to help the Bills, but I think the biggest story in terms of that is that the Browns are selling. And let's not lie here, the Browns' sole problem, well, one of the main problems is Deshaun Watson and probably the ownership. It's not the coaching staff. I think Stefanski, he's a 2-time coach of the year. He would slide into a job very easily if he got fired by the Browns. They've got weapons. They've got Myles Garrett. I know Nick Chubb's been injured, but Nick Chubb's coming back. You've got David Njoku. You had Amari Cooper. These are players that could potentially be put up for trade, as Dave alluded to. You know, Myles Garrett, he could go to the Lions, the Jets, the Vikings, potentially. These are all teams that could be in for his services, but Njoku as well. I've heard the Broncos need a tight end. They've been looking at him.
So let me tell you something about the Browns, which I always found incredibly fascinating, and I don't know how they managed to pull this off. But they had the league's best left tackle for his entire career, and it wasn't even close, a guy called Joe Thomas. Every single trading cycle, there was rumours that the man who was the best player by a mile and by far the worst team was going to get traded to a contender. And he just did his full stint there and became a Cleveland legend. And for some reason, I get the distinct impression that Myles Garrett is going to do the same. I don't think he's going anywhere.
You could be right, but we still have to look at it from a logical sense that the Browns are now going to be a selling team. That Amari Cooper trade is the first one that tells you that they are in that camp. It may not be Garrett specifically, but, you know, like I said, you got David Njoku, Nick Chubb. Maybe not. The reason why I'm saying this is because I've been thinking long and hard about it based on most of the reporting that I've seen. And I've come to the conclusion that what they've actually done is realise they're not going to have a great season and cashed out on somebody for a high price who they were going to lose for nothing in the off-season. So I don't think it is truly the Browns going... I kind of say it is to annoy Jim, but I don't think it truly is, because they have Njoku. They could probably get, a second or third round pick for him. But their main strength is still that O-line once it comes back from injury. I think the way they're looking at it is we know that we're not going to be a contender this year because we've got Deshaun Watson. But I don't think they're looking to burn off all of their talent. I think that they will cherry pick the players that they put up for trade based on whether or not they will be able to retain them next year, based on the fact that they're still going to have to put up with Deshaun Watson for one more year. That's now my thinking with it. I've kind of applied my logic over it and come to a different conclusion than everyone else. You're thinking it from the Browns' perspective, which is probably the right thought process. I'm thinking from the player's perspective. If I'm Myles Garrett, David Njoku, Nick Chubb, I know he's been injured, but still, when he is fit and if he plays like he did, he's a top 5 running back in the league. Do you really want to play 11 more games with Deshaun Watson as your quarterback, knowing you're most likely going to lose? When you could go to a potential contender who needs you? Like I said, the Vikings, the Lions, the Jets, these are all... the Jets, we're not sure if they're going to be contenders, but they seem to be going all in, so they're going to try. And the Lions and Vikings who are 5-0 and 4-1. Do you really want to sit there and stew at the Browns and wait, maybe next year we'll be all right?
I mean, is this where Stefanski's comments this week can become a little bit dangerous? Where he's still turning around and saying that Deshaun Watson is their best opportunity of winning games. Because if you've got anybody that's potentially on the fence, like Ollie's saying, or you've got anybody that's potentially looking at the situation and going, maybe an escape here before the trade deadline, and then you've got your head coach going, oh no, we're sticking with Deshaun Watson, does that not tip the scales, Dave?
Honestly, it would depend on how Jameis Winston is looking in practice. From what I can tell, in order for there to be pressure for QB to replace a quarterback, then they've got to be knocking on the door in practice, right? They've got to be showing something which gives the other players an indication that maybe things will be different with that QB in. Now, it's altogether possible that Watson's outperforming Winston in practice, which would shock me, if I'm honest. But at the same time, I think what Stefanski says and what he has to say to preserve his job might be one and the same thing. If I'm honest.
They are desperate for Nick Chubb, aren't they? They just need a shift back to their running game, the Browns, just to give them a fighting chance.
The injury that Nick Chubb had, if it only takes him 12 months to recover and to have the same burst and pace that he had prior to it, it's a remarkable thing indeed. If I were them, if there were any team sniffing around him and you thought he'd pass a medical, I'd probably let Chubb go. But then I'm looking at it from a perspective of, would I be willing to take the risk of persisting with him knowing what happened? And I don't know. It's hard for me to fathom he's going to be the same player that he was. And I think that I'd be worried that my emotions of wanting him to come back as the player that he was were getting in the way of a practical decision over his future. It happened with Teddy Bridgewater. I'd have signed Teddy Bridgewater to $8 million as a backup for the Vikings. Because he was Teddy Bridgewater.
That's because you're a founding member of the Teddy Bridgewater Appreciation Society, though, Dave.
It was Teddy Bridgewater. Now, Teddy had the same injury, remember?
Card-carrying member. Member 001, Dave Keane.
There might have been someone previous to me. I mean, when but I definitely went into it.
I think Mike Zimmer was part of that fan club with Dave.
Yeah, said it. The co-founding members. Look, we are. Time is running away from us on Utter Punts, and we have got a couple of little things that I would like to get through, including Tom Brady's purchase of a minority stake in the Raiders. We're going to talk about that in just a moment on Utter Punts. First up, have a little listen to our sponsors. Here at Utter Punts, we love watching the NFL with friends, and in our opinion, there's no better place to grab a bite to eat and watch the NFL than Beer Keller in Manchester. The burgers are massive, there's loads of HD screens, the wings are great, and there's a superb choice of drinks behind the bar too. Most importantly for us though, the people are brilliant, like-minded NFL fans who want to enjoy the game and have a laugh. It's definitely one of the best venues to watch your favourite team in. Welcome back to Utter Punts. Yeah, a couple of little stories to get through before we call it a day on this episode, and we're going to start with Tom Brady's purchase of a minority stake in the Las Vegas Raiders. It's very interesting to talk about this with these two gentlemen because they're both Birmingham City fans. So anything that potentially draws attention away from their beautiful little club at St Andrews might not necessarily be a good thing. Dave, how are you feeling about Tom Brady splitting his attentions away from Blues?
I'm absolutely delighted. Are you kidding me? We're going to have NFL money being funneled through Tom Brady into Blues. It's going to be fantastic. Also, it means that Birmingham now has a direct connection with Vegas. I'm assuming that at some point an airline company is going to go, maybe we should do a direct flight. And then happy goddamn days. It'll be awesome. Yeah, I'm sorry, what's the problem with our really rich and successful owners picking up another acquisition to go and have another cash revenue?
I was just thinking care and attention, Dave.
We've got football people for that, mate. Like he's wrapped his TB12 fitness piece around us, and it's going well. To be fair, there's a definite upgrade in fitness. But like we don't need Tom here every day. We want him to have a life, enjoy himself, and only come over to the Blues when he feels like having his life changed, like that day against Wrexham, mate.
Is it good that we've got Tom Brady back in the NFL in a hands-on ownership kind of way, Ollie?
I'd love it if he plays himself next year, by the way. Just thought I'd get that.
He can't legally. An NFL owner legally can't. But
I love that Ollie's checked that.
We're an NFL UK podcast, so let's talk about it from a UK perspective. Now we're talking in fun. Obviously, we're both Birmingham City fans. Let's talk of it from a commercially and financial perspective and an opportunity. So Birmingham City, for those that don't know, who are just NFL fans, are building a 61,000 seater stadium sports quarter in East Birmingham.
61,000.
That's what I said.
That one's important though, isn't it? Because it's a little bit bigger than Tottenham's.
Well, it's the smallest capacity for an NFL stadium, I believe you can have. So that's why I think it's 61,000. Tom Brady, and this is the thing, he's not our main owner, it's United Capital Management, who are co-founded by Tom Wagner, who is actually our owner, who is also part of this deal with the Las Vegas Raiders, as he's announced on his social media. So it's him and Tom Brady who have purchased a 5% stake that will be going up to 10% of the Las Vegas Raiders. You've got the international games, which are in London, which is not always the most accessible place to always go to, particularly Wembley Stadium, which is horrible to get out of. You've got 61,000 seat sports quarter being built in Birmingham, which is in the middle of the country and very accessible.
HS2 is actually going to reach and be completed as well.
HS2. So when
25 years or something.
The Las Vegas Raiders as well, for people who don't know, are not a very good team in terms of how they perform, but in terms of merchandising, are one of the best teams in the world. I mean, you see people wearing Raiders stuff and they don't even know who they are. They've just bought it because it looks cool. That'll be part of the reason that they've purchased that. And also in terms of day of things with flights, Birmingham City are now sponsored by Delta Airlines, who are one of the biggest airline companies in the world. So when you add all these mix of things together, what I see is a future where Birmingham City and the Las Vegas Raiders have a similar connection to Fulham and the Jacksonville Jaguars, similar to the 49ers and Leeds United in this sort of connection, and it'll only help grow it in the UK here. It's going to help with the international games, because I can very much see a future where in 5 years we're having NFL London international games being held in Birmingham, which is, like I said, much more accessible. I think it's positive in terms of for the NFL perspective. I think the industry, the interesting thing is what's going to happen with his broadcasting contract with Fox, because he can't speak ill of referees as part of his ownership contract. So is that going to create a problem? He can't be in pre-production meetings as well as part of this contract, which is going to make it very difficult. And another thing, like I said, he can't play anymore, which basically confirms his retirement. So it is interesting. It also
I was just saying there was two major concerns, weren't there? And this Fox contract that you're talking about was one of those two biggies.
Yes, but the reason the Raiders have brought him in is to identify a quarterback, as well as a name value. And the reason he's bought into them is profitability and connections with his other sports team, because they also own, I don't know this team specifically, but Tom Wagner and Tom Brady also own a pickleball team together. So they now own a pickleball team, part of the Las Vegas Raiders and Birmingham City Football Club. So it's going to be interesting how all those connect together.
Okay, final thing to have a little chat about on the podcast this week is Nick Sirianni and the Eagles, because, well, like we mentioned a little bit earlier, they did a brilliant job in making the Browns seem competitive this week, and that probably launches Nick Sirianni square into the hot seat at the moment, doesn't it, chaps?
Yes. I thought it was an embarrassing display from him, to be honest. I mean, during the game, you heard chants of fire Sirianni from the Eagles fans when they were 10-10, I think the score was at the time. Myles Garrett blocked a punt or a field goal and someone else returned it for a touchdown. Listen, you beat the Browns by 4 points. The Browns are currently, with the Jags, are arguably the worst teams in football, and this was a team that was in the Super Bowl 2 years ago. The regression has been ridiculous, particularly with the addition of Saquon Barkley. You've got the same quarterback. Granted, I don't think he's as good as people originally thought, but it's still the same quarterback. Devontae Smith, AJ Brown. You haven't lost anyone really, and you've added Saquon Barkley, who's arguably a top 3 to top 5 running back in the NFL. And then he brings his kid to the press conference afterwards so that no one can basically have a go and address what has happened. It's a shambolic performance. And then at the end of the game as well, he turns around and gives it loads to the Eagles fans, which he has an account of doing before. I remember him doing it in 2022, the season they got to the Super Bowl. He's not the guy for it. For the weapons they have, so many coaches would kill for the opportunity to be the coach of the Philadelphia Eagles because they have got so many weapons. He's not doing a good job at all. Winning by 4 points against the Browns, and let's be honest, if the Browns had any other quarterback in the league, I'm talking Trevor Lawrence, I'm talking Andy Dalton, I'm not even saying Josh Allen or Patrick Mahomes. Any quarterback that is competent and can complete a pass, they win that game. They hands down win that game. I mean, one of the strange things was Stefanski deciding to kick a field goal to make it 20-16 instead of just going for it on 4th down. But I get it because of how bad your quarterback is. So you just go and take the points because you have no faith in him. But then, obviously, going back to the Browns, he then comes out afterwards and says he's our best opportunity. But clearly, during the game, he shows that he has no faith in him. So I think Sirianni will end up being fired. I don't think it'll be a mid-season firing. I think it'll be a end of the season, particularly if they miss out on the playoffs, which they're 3-2 now, so they're not doing too bad record-wise, but it's more about how those games have gone that are an indicator comparatively to how they did when they got to the Super Bowl in 2022 and they started last season 10-0. But this isn't just about what's happened this season. This is about how they ended last season and losing in the wild card to the Bucks. So it's been a long thing, a bit like Doug Peterson. Like the Jags lost their last 6 games last season, and that's carried on this year. But
he's definitely under pressure, Ollie. I agree with you. I think the bit that made it worse for me, Dave, was the fact that he came out, had a bit of a pop at the fans, then apologised for having a bit of a pop at the fans. And I know that you've got a deep-seated love for the Eagles and the fans in Philadelphia, and they're your favourite people in the entire world. But they will, when they revolt, that will make his job almost untenable, won't it?
So I think his job kind of already is, if I'm honest. But I'm also wondering what they're going to do with their GM, because what might have to happen is Harry Roseman ends up deciding to have to clean house with Sirianni. Then it's going to be up to him again to replace Sirianni. Now, the thing is, he was the one who replaced Doug Pederson with Sirianni. He helped to recruit the first coaching staff that Sirianni had. He helped to recruit the second coaching staff that Sirianni had. And he helped to recruit the third current coaching staff that Sirianni has had at the Eagles. So it comes down to whether or not they're going to be allowing Harry Roseman to carry on if he decided to fire Sirianni. So I can see a situation here where they basically write off this season as a transitional season due to the fact they've brought in 2 new coordinators. Give them a year to bed in, and then it will all be determined on whether or not the Eagles are showing any progress towards the back end of the season. And I think that probably has to be the way they're looking at this, because it's the only way they can give Harry Roseman time to save himself, and it's also the only way they can put in place a full analysis of exactly where this coaching staff is at and what this coaching staff is capable of doing with this bunch of players. Having said that, where the buck does kind of rest with Harry Roseman is the draft picks that the Eagles have brought in have all been consensusly very good, consensusly high value, but a few of them don't seem to have paid off. And the one that pops into my mind immediately is the pass rusher that they took the year they had 3 first-round picks. In Nico Smith. I think it's Nico Smith. Can you double check that for me, Ollie? The name of the pass rusher the Eagles drafted. But that's the thing. He's not even a household name now. And he was taken in the top 23 of the draft less than 3 years ago. And he's not come through. Now, what they did in the off-season was they signed Bryce Huff from the Jets as a pass rusher. They let Hassan Riddick go to the Jets. So they essentially made that swap. Now, Bryce Huff was a situational pass rusher with a lot of sacks last year, but not a lot of pressures for the Jets. And he's done nothing this year for the Eagles. So when you start to look at the sort of the personnel decisions that they're making, like just lately they seem to be going downhill. Now that could be because of bad advice coming from coaching staff, because you are meant to trust and listen to your coaching staff. But all in all, it could be that we're coming to the end of the Harry Roseman regime in Philadelphia.
Nolan Smith,
thank you, mate. Which, bearing in mind he got them the Super Bowl, I don't think any of us thought would happen, but it's been 7 years now and they seem to be getting further and further away from another Super Bowl appearance.
Hard to disagree with any of that. Look, we would love to hear from you. If you've got any thoughts on anything that we've spoken about in the podcast over the course of today, you can drop us a line on social media. Just search for Utter Punts Podcast. It would be absolutely cracking to hear from you. Whilst you're there, copy the link and like and share and do all of that jazz with anybody that you think might enjoy the podcast as well, because we love making it for you. Time has beaten us, as always, gentlemen, but an absolute pleasure to have you on. Ollie, thank you very much indeed.
thank you so much.
Big Dave, always a pleasure. Thank you, pal. And we will see you next week on Utter Punts.